We are going to hear Benjamin Netanyahu taking the podium now. Let's hear what he has to say. He's now taking his mask off. We will hear Benjamin Netanyahu.
Good evening, citizens of Israel. This is a historic day. Today was the first direct flight from Israel to Morocco with an Israeli-American delegation in order to promote peace between us. I spoke to them on the way, and they asked me, you know what the number of the flight is? I said, Khamsa, 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 555. And that expresses a lot of the things that connect us. We are, in recent months, changing history. 4 peace treaties in 4 months. Second, on this day, together with health ministry officials, I spoke from last night, midnight, afternoon today, with the CEOs of several of the biggest vaccination companies in the world. I can't tell you the precise details, the precise numbers, but I can say that in the wake of these discussions, and in the wake of our efforts, Israel can definitely be among the first states to get out of the coronavirus crisis. I also had a long conversation with them about the danger of the mutation that is growing around the whole world. I'll tell you the good news first. They're very optimistic that the vaccines will still be effective against this mutation. These are the mutations we already have in Israel. And they say that in the end it can even reach an efficiency rate of 95%. This is huge news if this is true. But it will take a few more days until we know. It's a really important thing for humanity and for the state of Israel. But on the other side, there is bad news. Like anywhere in the world, we're seeing a sharp rise in morbidity. I expect blue and white to reach the right decisions for the health of citizens of Israel, related to things to do with the budget, to handle the economy in an effective way, even in election mode. Now, it's not a secret. I didn't want elections. Likud did not want elections. We voted time and time again against elections, including last night. Unfortunately, and I'm saying the truth, Benny Gantz reneged on the agreements between us. And this decision is dragging the state of Israel into elections. And I think it happened, and this isn't a secret, because of an internal fight in his party. He reneged because of his insistence to continue giving Nissan against the coalition agreement, to advance a dictatorship of left-wing bureaucrats. And these bureaucrats are ruining the will of the people. The public wants one thing, and they say something else. And that is inconceivable in a democracy. We simply cannot let this happen. We're against elections. This is a wrong decision from blue and white. But if they force elections on us, I promise we will win. God willing, the Likud will bring a huge victory for 2 reasons. The reason is that most citizens of Israel see the leadership and the incredible achievements, bringing vaccines to Israel, turning Israel almost into the first country in the world. Peace treaties, historic peace treaties, blocking the Iranian threat, and turning the economy into one of the leading ones in the world. I know there are difficulties. I know that self-employed people and storekeepers, I know there are difficulties. I accept it. But only we know how to deal with it. We've brought a lot of aid plans. We'll bring more aid plans. And here too, I hope that blue and white will not stop our aid for political reasons. We want to help the citizens of Israel in the final stretch of getting out of this crisis. The second reason that we will win is that the decision in these elections is clear. It's either a government that depends on Lapid and the left, or a fully right-wing government. That's the choice. Look, There are many politicians, many are claiming the throne and say they have the experience to be prime minister. Look, only you will judge. You will judge alone which are politicians. And that's your right in a democracy. But there is one thing I can tell you for sure. And it's got nothing to do with any judgment, it's just a fact. Each of these politicians, the only way to form a government is by linking up with Lapid and the left. They have no other way. They can give many declarations and they'll tell you how right-wing they are, but they have no other way of forming a government without Lapid and the left-wing parties. The only way to bring a right-wing government without the Lapid, without the left, which all other politicians have to lead on, the only way to realize all the rights objectives, the only way to create a fully right-wing government is to vote for the Likud. And just for the Likud. I want to promise that if we go to elections, I will continue working around the clock on the issues that matter to you. Peace, the economy, everything you need. Full gas. Thank you. Question whether Netanyahu ever intended to fulfill the rotation agreement? Look, first of all, I agreed to the rotation in the agreements between us, which they reneged on. Yesterday's decision, even though they violated the agreement, they violated all the agreements on our side, they set up a government inside a government, and the idea of the rotation was that everyone would respect their side. They didn't respect their side. I agreed to the rotation, the incredible decision yesterday, that there would be a rotation on the set date with no way out. So first of all, you're wrong. There was an agreement. And as for the roles, etc., I let ministers divide up the roles only for those who were ministers, and it happened in the past as well. I've done this because we were condensed into a situation of a small number of ministers, fewer than we thought, because of the unity government with blue and white. I did what I did before in a previous government. For example, one of the people I truly admire, who's now the Speaker of the Knesset, Yariv Levin, wanted to be a minister, wasn't a minister. So that's the answer to your question. Mr. Prime Minister, for months you prevented the passage of a budget for 2021, saying there was no time. The moment you wanted an agreement with blue and white, suddenly it was possible to do it in 2 months. So how should citizens of Israel feel today when they finally understand that this was all about purely political? And will you advance state prosecutor appointment? Now look, we could have easily set up a 2020 budget and in a few weeks, 4 weeks, we could have brought a 2021 budget. That was the proposal. I mean, that's what was on the table yesterday. So there was no problem. There was a question about budget law. More or less it gives us the framework for the budget for 2020. And that lets us go into 2021 in a much better state. And we found the way to agree. And I think this is to the credit, not just to us, but also to blue and white. I think you can say this. That's important. Second question you asked about the appointments. We have agreements about the appointments, which were violated. We want to appoint. Look, it can't be sold in advance. It can't be stitched up between friends and without letting people who are meant to decide, the elected ministers, the people, Pope chosen by the people. No, we're going to decide for them in all sorts of stitched-up committees. And they call that a proper government. And no, that's not how it works in most countries. In most democracies, they don't have that. This doesn't exist. In many democracies, there are other processes. And I think that we want to bring it back to what I think are the right processes. According to our poll, most of the public sees you as responsible for dispersing the Knesset. Do you think that they are unjustly pinning the responsibility on you? And a second question, the health ministry wants a hermetic lockdown. Your position? Look, as for what the public thinks, okay, it's regrettable. They're wrong. Look, what happened last night. We could have avoided this. But it fell because of the pressure to give in to Nissenkorn and left-wing bureaucrats. Anyone with his head screwed on can see this. It's something we can't agree to. And I think that as a result of the election, fully right-wing government and not a government dependent on Lapid and the left will finally change this. So that's the first thing. As for the recommendations of the health ministry, look, we have worked on a process of reining it in and then going to a lockdown. When we're talking about such a rapid rise in morbidity that we have no choice but to go to a full lockdown, we'll discuss this tonight. I'm going from here to discussions into the wee hours with health ministry officials and with others, and we'll reach a decision that isn't easy. But if we wait for the rise in morbidity and even of the new virus, which with all the optimism you've heard, we can't know, it could well be here, there's a very high chance that it's here, we don't know what its true influence is and whether the vaccine will stop it, so we have to stop it in time. Yesterday we closed the skies. Why did I insist on closing the skies? To isolate Israel as best as we can. But what did we do in the first and second wave with great success? We closed the skies in the first wave, and immediately afterwards we imposed a lockdown and we got control of the vaccine. And then it sort of went like this, not more than that. So now we're going to do the same thing. And as we had back then to close the skies under lockdown, we may have to deal with that today. I want to tell you, you asked about failure. What failure? The state of Israel is probably, I can't say it's ahead of all the countries in the world relative to population, but we may well be number one. But we're definitely somewhere up there. It's close. So first of all, it's a huge success. And it's not obvious. I've had, 11 conversations with the leaders of these companies, and they say, no prime minister talks with us like this. I go down into the nitty-gritty of the details. With Chezi Levy, Dr. Osnat Luxemburg, who's dealing with this, in order to lock this as best as we can, and also to persuade them to give the state of Israel these vaccines. So, now as for morbidity itself, I don't know whether you're following what's going on in other countries. We've lost more than 3,000 people, and the mortality rate has risen. Look, this is tough. Every bereavement is terrible. But in Sweden, I don't know whether it's 7,000, 8,000 people have died. In Germany, every day it's 1,000 people. Every day it's 1,000 people. Angela Merkel says we've lost control. And we must not lose control. So first of all, what you're calling a failure, I call a relative success. Look, obviously I want it to be better, but relative to other countries, our situation is much better. All these countries, almost all of them, are going into a lockdown, and a really tough lockdown. In Britain, they've put limitation. London has been closed off. You know the ring road? Around London? You can't go in and out. In London. They put a tough lockdown in France, lockdowns in all these countries, and what you're calling a failure is what they consider a great success. I think we've done this correctly. I think people are always in the media saying, but in every international test, I'm saying this not with haughtiness, but we're better than most countries in the world, and the facts speak for themselves. Mr. Prime Minister, you set up an emergency government that is now breaking apart, perhaps at the peak.
We've just been hearing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as Israel's parliament prepares to dissolve, setting the country into a new election cycle. Let's go straight to our Eli Hochenberg, who is in the Israeli parliament. Eli, we still got about 3.5 hours officially on the clock before the government collapses and we go to new elections. But that certainly sounded like the opening campaign speech of Benjamin Netanyahu toward March elections.
Yeah, still a few hours left to go, Calev, but nothing is expected to happen during those hours. Nothing can happen, really, since we're talking about a very clear-cut deadline and in which the second it expires, Parliament automatically dissolves. So the highway to election cannot be stopped at this point in time. Benjamin Netanyahu's message this evening is very clear. We did not want elections. We, the Likud party, we voted against it. And this is perhaps something we're likely to hear several times from this point onwards, and this, of course, according to the facts. The Likud party did support the motion to delay the deadline, opposing the Blue and White party members decided to avoid supporting it or even voting against it. So again, this is a ticket, if you will, that Benjamin Netanyahu is likely to play for a major part of the campaign, at least the very beginning. But Benny Gantz and Benjamin Netanyahu are no longer rivals from this point onwards. If you're looking at the election campaign season that is ahead of us. Their rivals are internal. Let it be Benny Gantz within his Blue and White party that appears to be breaking apart once again into small fractions, and other parties and the center left-wing bloc. And for Benjamin Netanyahu, the competition is definitely within the so-called right-wing bloc, most notably the Likud party defector Gidon Saar, who is forming, or has formed rather, a new party. So their battles again are no longer vis-a-vis one another, but rather within their own respective blocks, if you will.
All right, Eli Hochenberg in the Knesset, thank you for that.